Did you know that the forest can teach more about freedom, happiness, and spirituality than any book or university? The problem is that we live in prisoners in routines, consumption and distractions that move away from the essentials. We are increasingly surrounded by noise, but empty inside. Thoreau has found that nature is the most magical teacher of all, because we give us back to ourselves. Today you will understand why this secret can transform your life.
Have you ever stopped to hear the silence? Not the urban silence full of muffled engines and electric noises, but the silence that lives between the trees, where each leaf seems to keep a secret? It was in this sacred territory that Henry David Thoreau believed there was the greatest master of humanity, nature itself. Imagine yourself walking alone through the forests of New England, where the wind crosses the pines like an invisible choir. The damp floor breathes under your feet.
There is no watch. There are no obligations. Only you and the world, finally stripped of social masks. In this scenario, Thoreau provokes us. Why seek wisdom in dusty books when Walden Lake reflects purely answers than any philosophical treaty? The forest teaches speechless. The river does not explain its current, but shows us that movement is the essence of life. Winter does not apologize for the cold, but it reminds us that every existence goes through cycles of death and rebirth. The owl gives no sermons, but its night wakefulness reveals that there is more mystery in the dark than in clarity. And here is the first rupture. In 19th century industrial America, while factories grew and cities thickened, Thoreau walked in the opposite direction as if to say, progress is not in the machines but in the human heart reconciled to the earth. Today, 2 centuries later, your voice echoes even more urgent, asking you, how much of your life is yours, and how much does it belong to the invisible gears that push you? If this reflection spoke to you, I have a special gift, an exclusive ebook with Thoreau's teachings and how to apply them in today's life. In it, you will find out how simplicity can be a weapon against anxiety, how silence can be a source of clarity, and how nature can become your greatest teacher. Click on the link fixed in the comments now, download for free, and take the first step to live more free, conscious and fully. There is a magic hidden in the simple. By sitting on the edge of a lake, you realize that the water is in no hurry. When observing the irregular flight of a hawk, he discovers that freedom never follows a straight line. By touching a centenary trunk, he understands that time is not just what the clock marks, but a spiral that surrounds us. But beware, this magic is not a stage show. It's silent, almost imperceptible. It requires attentive eyes, requires detachment. Therefore, Thoreau isolated himself in a wooden cabin on the banks of Walden, not because she hated people, but because she wanted to meet the human that the crowd chokes. And you? Have you ever wondered what your Walden would be? Can a place where the noise of the world is silent and your soul can finally speak? Perhaps this is the beginning of our journey. And if you have the courage to follow, you will find that nature not only educates, it transforms. When you look at a lake still, what do you see? Many would say, the surface of the water, but Thoreau, via beyond. For him, each reflection was a portrait of himself. Nature was not just a scenario, it was a living mirror that returned to man what he tried to hide from himself. In the heart of New England, where autumn paints the trees in tones of fire, Thoreau found that stations not only transform the landscape, but reveal the interior cycles of the soul. Winter was loneliness and recollection. Spring, hope and rebirth. Summer, fullness and expansion. And the fall, autumn was detachment, the memory that even the most intense beauty needs to learn to fall. He believed that American society was already moving away from its essence. While banks, railways, and factories emerged as modern temples, the ordinary man forgot to look inside, and the question echoes to this day, amid the skyscrapers of New York or the bustling streets of Los Angeles. How to expect inner peace we live permanently disconnected from the land that sustains us? The forest does not deceive, she reveals. If you enter it with arrogance, you will find suffocating loneliness. If you come in with humility, you will find silent answers. Thoreau understood this as a universal morality lesson. The natural world is fair because it does not make concessions. The heat that warms can also burn. The river that sacia can also drown. Life is only supported by the balance between the extremes. And here comes a powerful paradox. While European philosophers wrote dense treatises about ethics, Thoreau said that it was enough to observe an oak. Your windfulness, its slow growth, its silent strength, were more instructive than many libraries. The tree teaches constancy, the bird teaches lightness, the stone teaches permanence. What is missing is a willingness to listen. But listening to nature requires courage because what we hear is not always what we want. Many times that's what we need. The silence of the mountains can confront us with our own smallness. The distant corner of a wolf can reveal how much we lose wild in us. The starry night may remind us of our insignificance before the cosmos, and at the same time our close connection with him. Thoreau has not isolated himself to escape the world. He isolated himself to see him better. His cabin in Walden was not an escape. It was a spiritual laboratory. There, between birds and lake, he tested a radical thesis. Living simply was not poverty, it was wealth. A wealth impossible to measure in dollars. And now I ask you, when was the last time you allowed yourself to stop? Not just turning off the phone for a few minutes, but really dive into silence without masks, no distractions, no hurry? Perhaps this is the greatest teaching of nature. It does not scream, it does not require, it does not compete. It only exists. And when there is, it shows us what it means to be. Have you noticed how the word freedom is used in excess in America? It is in the flags, in the speeches, in the patriotic songs. But do we really know what it means? Thoreau was suspicious. For him, true freedom was not to vote, accumulate goods, or circulate through the streets of a city. Authentic freedom was quieter, more intimate, and could only be found in communion with nature. One morning, walking on the banks of Lake Walden, Thoreau wrote, "I went to the forest because I wanted to live deliberately." It was not romantic poetry. It was protest. In the 19th century, the United States already became a nation obsessed with material progress, while men and women imprisoned in debt, exhaustive routines, and suffocating social conventions. Sound familiar? The forest offered Thoreau a different freedom, to choose the rhythm of life. The corner of a bird does not ask for permission to the clock. The sunrise does not depend on the stock exchange. Rain does not obey political borders. There, surrounded by the sublime indifference of nature, Thoreau found that the greatest arrest of modern man is not iron bars, but the invisible currents of consumption, haste, and the need for approval. Think about it. How many decisions are really yours? How many choices do you make without the weight of the expectation of others? Maybe less than I would like to admit. And it is precisely at this point that nature becomes master. Between trees, there is no audience. Between rivers, there are no judges. Between stars, there are no bosses. What exists is you, raw, vulnerable, without disguise. And this vulnerability, far from being weakness, is the gateway to inner freedom. But beware, Thoreau did not preach a naive return to primitive life. He didn't want everyone to leave cities and live in cabins. His gesture was symbolic, proving that it is possible to live with less, think more clearly, and achieve a form of spiritual freedom that no law can grant or take. This paradox burns to this day. A country that is proud of its independence, but often confuses excess freedom, rights with consumption, choosing with compulsion. Thoreau seemed to whisper to our ears, if you need a lot to feel free, then it's not free yet. And here comes an inevitable question. Would you stand to be alone, without distractions, surrounded only by the vastness of nature? Or would you find out, scared, that you never really knew yourself? Perhaps this is the most uncomfortable lesson that the forest offers. True freedom is not to conquer the world, but to conquer itself. Have you tried to hear the silence? Not that superficial silence of an empty room, but the living silence, full of invisible breaths, which only exists when the wind lies on the trees and the world seems to hold on to the breath. For Thoreau, this silence was more instructive than any political discourse or religious sermon. He believed that the noise of American cities was not only physical, but spiritual. Each train whistle, every factory hammer, every financial transaction drowned a little more the inner voice of the human being. In Lake Walden, he found that silence is not the absence of sound, but presence of meaning. The grasser of a wild duck, the noise distant from a broken branch, the echo of his own heart beating, all of this formed a discrete symphony in which life was revealed in its purest essence. And perhaps this is the most urgent provocation for us today. When was the last time you surrendered to real silence? Not that forced silence to turn off the phone for 5 minutes, but the complete dive in the sound void of nature. In the modern United States, it is increasingly rare. The noise of the metropolises never ceases, and even in the field, drones and engines cut the air. But Thoreau believed that silence is a fundamental condition for wisdom. Without it, we only accumulate information. With it, we can finally turn information into understanding. The silence confronts. In the void, you have nowhere to hide. His anxieties arise. His forgotten memories knock on the door. His poorly resolved choices ask for an answer. It is uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but it is also liberating, because when all external voices are silent, only their inner truth remains. And here comes a fascinating paradox. American society values freedom of expression, but rarely values the freedom of silence. How many can withstand minutes without speaking, without listening to music, without filling every moment with distraction? Thoreau reminded us that true wisdom is born when we manage to inhabit this emptiness. It is not an escape, not alienation. It is reconciliation. It is accepting that we are part of a larger order, as vast as the starry sky that covers the forests of New England. So I ask you, is it not precisely in silence that life tries to talk to us? Are we not deaf to the essentials because we confuse noise with vitality? Silence, Thoreau said, is the teacher who never deceives. And maybe that's why so many escape from him. Have you ever noticed how America has become a temple of accumulation? Larger houses, more powerful cars, infinite shelves of products that promise happiness in colorful boxes. But in the midst of this abundance, why do so many feel empty? Thoreau dared to reverse the logic. For him, the real wealth was no longer in having, but in needing less. His cabin in Walden was not just a physical shelter. It was manifest against the tyranny of abundance. There, with few tools, some books, seeds, and the natural landscape, he experienced the boldness of living free from artificial dependence created by society. Simplicity, for Thoreau, was power. Who needs little is not dominated by anyone. Those who are content with the essentials do not kneel in the face of debt, fashion, or status. Those who learn to find beauty in the trivial discover that life has never been poor, just we were blind. But here, there is a painful rupture, because in the United States of the 19th century, as in today, wealth was measured in dollars and possessions. Thoreau, however, asked, what is the use of having the world if you lose the ability to be present on a simple morning, next to a serene lake? Imagine, as neighbors ran after land and business, he was busy planting beans, not out of laziness, but as a spiritual discipline. Each cultivated beans was a symbol of independence. Each meal taken from the land itself was a declaration of sovereignty against a system that imprisoned for consumption. And now, think of you. How much of what it really has belongs to it? And how much is it just dead weight accumulated by fear of seeming less than others? How many hours of your life have been delivered to support objects that do not change the essence of who you are in the end? Simplicity reveals an uncomfortable secret. Happiness is not expensive, but it requires courage. Courage to say no to social pressures. Courage to endure the look of those who do not understand. Courage to detach from excess and find that in the void left by things, room is born for what really matters. Thoreau did not preach misery but choose. He said, simply, not for moralism but for freedom, not for sacrifice but for fullness, because the essentials, unlike the superfluous, never cheats on us. And maybe you realize deep down that the weight you imprison you most is not in your hands but what you insist on carrying within you. Have you ever entered a forest like who enters a church? Thoreau believed that each tree was a sacred column, each lake was an altar, every bird corner was a liturgy. For him, nature was not just a landscape, it was an invisible cathedral where the divine revealed itself purely than in any stone construction. In the United States of the 19th century, while churches multiplied and pastors disputed faithful, Thoreau walked alone through the woods of Concord. There he discovered a spirituality without dogmas, made of silence, wind, and light. He did not deny God, but questioned the need for intermediaries to feel him. The starry sky was enough. The moon reflected in Walden was a lot of preaching. And here comes the provocation. How many of us seek answers in artificial temples when life itself offers us clear signs, if we just learn to listen? The sunrise is no less sacred than any hymn. The metamorphosis of a butterfly is no less revealing than any deed. Thoreau via nature as a teacher of spirituality because there was no hypocrisy in it. The tree does not pretend to be what it is not. The river does not disguise its flow. Winter does not hide its hardness. Everything is authentic. Everything is righteous. And this silent integrity, he said, is the secret language of the divine. But there is a paradox. The United States, A land that proclaims itself blessed often confuses spirituality with a spectacle. Rich churches, inflamed discourses, promises of prosperity, and at the same time a growing alienation in relation to earth, cycles, simple. Thoreau seemed to want to scream, "The sacred is not distant. He is under his feet on the floor you step every day." And here I ask you, when was the last time you allowed yourself to feel reverence? Not afraid, not superstition, but authentic reverence for the grandeur of life. A sunset that made him silent, an open field that seemed infinite, the sound of a storm that made your heart beat faster. This reverence is the beginning of all spiritual wisdom, and it is also what is missing the most in our time. Because when changing the mystery for entertainment, we lost the chance to find the invisible. Thoreau believed that nature is magical because it speaks directly to the soul, without translators, without dogmas, no noise. She is school, but also temple, teacher, but also prophecy. And if you have the courage to cross this silent portal, you may find out that the sacred has always been within your hands, on a sheet, a stone, in a ray of sunshine. Have you ever wondered what progress really means? In the United States of the 19th century, this word was repeated as a mantra. Iron rails crossed the fields, factories raised their chimneys, benches multiplied. The country seemed to run towards the future, but Thoreau looked at this race with suspicion. He wondered, wherever he, for what? If man gains more speed but loses the ability to contemplate, is this advance or regression? If the industry increases production but decreases freedom, is this victory or defeat? From his cabin in Walden, Thoreau saw the railroad as an ambiguous symbol. Yes, it was an extraordinary human feat, but it was also an invisible chain. Each track cutting the forest was a reminder that nature was being tamed in the name of a future that may never come. And here comes an uncomfortable reflection. To this day, America is proud of its skyscrapers, its infinite roads, its state-of-the-art technology. But do you, in the end, not exchange the essentials for the accessory? The silence of the forest through the rush of cities, the wisdom of the stations through the tyranny of the clock, the corner of birds through the machine whistle. Thoreau dared to suggest that true progress is not what increases our ability to conquer the world, but what expands our ability to understand ourselves. What is the use of crossing continents in hours if we are still unable to cross the inner abysses that divide us? He saw American obsession with material advancement as a form of collective blindness. A blindness so seductive that you may feel to this day, that feeling of always running after something, more money, more status, more achievements, never getting anywhere. And here is the paradoxical lesson of nature. It progresses without haste. The tree grows in silence. The river digs its way without hurrying. The mountain rises in ages, not decades. There is progress in the natural world, but patient, organic progress, which does not destroy to conquer. So I ask you, do we not need to redefine what we call progress? Wouldn't it be wise to measure the advance not by speed but by depth, not by the accumulation but by harmony? Thoreau believed yes, that magic nature is the best teacher precisely because it shows us that the future does not have to be a race. It can be a slow, conscious walk full of meaning. Are you afraid of loneliness? Most people have. In American cities of the 19th century, and even more in the 21st century, being only seen as failure, absence, lack. But for Thoreau, loneliness was a portal. In his cabin on the banks of Walden, he spent long periods without direct human contact. It was neither abandonment nor pathological isolation. It was a choice. Choice of those who realized that only in true solitude is it possible to hear the voice that always accompanies us, but that we rarely let, our own. And here there is a deep contradiction, because we were never as connected as today, and at the same time, we've never been so lonely. Social networks, phones, full streets, and yet empty hearts. Thoreau seemed to predict this paradox when he said that it is possible to be surrounded by people and yet feel more only than in a deserted forest. The loneliness he defended was different. It was not missing, it was fullness. It was not isolation, fear the dive. In the silence of the forest, in the company of birds and insects, he found that being alone is actually being whole. And here comes an uncomfortable question. Can you be with yourself without distracting yourself? Can you support the weight of your thoughts without looking for a screen, a voice, a song to anesthetize? Perhaps it is precisely this inability that prevents us from growing spiritually. Thoreau saw solitude as a discipline. Each day passed in the woods was a soul training, an opportunity to cut fears, anxieties, and illusions. There, without audience, he learned that we do not need the constant validation of others to exist. The forest did not applaud him, did not judge him, did not condemn him, just received him. And this experience reveals a greater paradox. Perhaps the true meaning of the community is only possible after we learn to be alone. Why, if you have never known yourself, how can you offer each other authentically? In the United States and in the world, we run after belonging, but we forget that the first belonging must be with ourselves. Without this, every relationship is a mask, every meeting is incomplete. So Thoreau challenges us, learn to be alone, not as punishment, but as a cure, not as abandonment, but as reconciliation. Because deep down, the loneliness we fear so much can be exactly what we need most, a silent mirror that gives us back to ourselves. Have you noticed that nature never asks permission to exist? Rio does not consult governments to follow its course. The trees do not ask for permission to grow. The wind does not bow to political borders. For Thoreau, this natural disobedience was a life lesson, and also a call to moral rebellion. In 1846, he was arrested for refusing to pay taxes that financed the Mexico War and supported slavery in the United States. His stay in prison lasted only one night, but echoed for centuries. Why? Because this simple gesture revealed something radical. The same freedom he found in Walden also needed to manifest himself in the face of social injustices. And here is revelation. The forest not only teaches contemplation, it teaches resistance. The tree that faces storms without folding, the rock that challenges centuries of erosion, the fire that, even destructive, prepares the soil for new lives. Everything in nature is an act of affirmation. Everything in nature is creative rebellion. Thoreau translated this language into philosophy. The same simplicity that freed him from consumption also freed him from unfair laws. His famous civil disobedience was born of the perception that it blindly obeys is betraying one's own conscience. And there is no greater imprisonment than a spirit that shuts off what knows to be wrong. Think about it. How many times have you silent for fear of counteracting? How many times did the doe follow, even knowing that something was wrong? Nature would never do that. The river never runs against itself. The sun never ceases to be born to please. Why do we humans accept to live against our own essence? This question crosses the centuries. From the struggle against slavery to the defense of civil rights, leaders like Gandhi and Martin Luther King drank from this Thoreauvian source. What started as a lonely cabin in Walden became a seed of silent revolutions that changed the story. And here comes the paradox. Thoreau sought silence, but ended up generating echoes that the whole world listened to. Perhaps because his lesson was too simple to be ignored. True freedom learned in nature must become courage in the face of injustice. Otherwise, it's just escape. So I ask you, do you have the courage to live like a river, to follow the course of your conscience, even if it means facing stones, criticism, and storms? The forest is clear. Living in harmony with the truth requires rebellion. And rebellion, when guided by consciousness, is the highest form of wisdom. Have you ever watched a fall leaf? The scene looks banal. The wind blows, the branch comes off, the leaf dances to the floor. But for Thoreau, there was no banality in that. Each fall was a teaching about eternity. As American society rushed to build railroads, expand cities, and register profits, the forest resembled an uncomfortable fact. Everything that is human is fleeting. The house, the car, the fortune, even the nations, everything dissolves. But nature, it remains. Always renew itself, always returns. Winter can kill the leaves, but spring returns life. Fire can devastate, but from burnt soil new seeds are born. Death in nature is never end, but transformation. And it was in the face of this relentless logic that Thoreau understood. We men are not above her, but inside her. This view is uncomfortable because it disassembles our illusion of control. You can program, plan, accumulate, but just a storm to remind you that you are not lord of time. Just a disease to show how fragile is your agenda. Nature does not negotiate, she just follows. And yet, far from being desperate, that was liberating to Thoreau. Because if life is brief, what matters is not the duration, but the intensity. The oak does not care about living centuries. It only grows with all its strength, day after day. The bird does not torment itself with the future. He just sings while there is air on his lungs. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson in the forest. Eternity is not in lasting forever, but in living fully every moment. Nature is magical because it transforms finitude into cycle, death into rebirth, the end in a fresh start. And you? Have you ever thought that your life can be part of a larger pace that goes far beyond your biography? What each act, every choice, every gesture is a seed thrown into an invisible soil that can flourish much after you are. Thoreau believed that living in tune with nature was to enter this eternal cycle, not as a spectator, but as a participant. And when we understand this, the fear of death dissolves, because we understand that we are not the owners of life. We are life. And perhaps, when your last leaf falls, there will be no end, but only continuity. As in the woods, where nothing is lost, everything becomes. Did you notice? From the first step in Walden so far, nature was not just a scenario. It was voice. It was master. It was a mirror. Thoreau believed that the greatest mistake of humanity is not ignorance, but forgetting. We forget that we are part of the earth, not owners of it. While the United States built roads and factories, it built silence and simplicity. While crowds sought progress, he sought meaning. While most ran after wealth, he discovered the magical richness of living with little. And here is the final revelation. The forest does not speak of human language, but if you learn to listen, you will hear everything. He will hear that freedom is not purchased, it is conquered within itself. He will hear that loneliness is not empty, it is full. He will hear that death is no end, it is a cycle. Thoreau has left us a message that goes through centuries. Nature is the best teacher because it never lies. It is hard and beautiful, simple and deep, silent and powerful. She teaches us not only to live, but to live true. Now the question comes back to you. Will you keep running after illusions? Or will you have the courage to simplify, silence, feel, and live deliberately? Walden's cabin was destroyed. Thoreau is no longer among us. But the lake still reflects the sky. The trees still grow. The wind still sings. The invitation remains. And perhaps, if you listen carefully, you will hear the call of the forest within you. If this video made sense to you, don't forget. Subscribe to the channel. Share with those who need this reflection. His support keeps this philosophical flame alive and helps us lead more people to question the life they lead. And get ready. In the next video, let's dive even deeper into another philosophical mystery that can turn the way you see the world.